The Dawning of Modern Independence for Ukraine presents Provisional Ukrainian Postage Stamps of the 1990s. This is the third edition, which was initiated in May 2017. This is Ukraine in Europe. As you can see, it's one of the larger countries in this region, and it is surrounded by Russia, Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. And it has significant shoreline with the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. The topographic map to the upper right shows Ukraine's relief. There are the Carpathian Mountains in the west, the Donets uplands in the east. That's where most of the coal mining occurs that Ukraine depends upon. Lowland areas by rivers and so forth. Now, the flag and the standard for Ukraine were repatriated in the early 1990s, just after they regained their independence. The trident represents the founding family, and the flag is equal to a blue half and a golden yellow half. The blue represents the sky, and the golden yellow represents acres and acres of wheat. There are some key points in time leading up to the ultimate independence of Ukraine with the dissolution of the USSR. So, independence had been brewing for quite a while. On July the 10th, 1990, Ukraine declared sovereignty, and a year later, they declared their intent to vote on independence. Interestingly, at that point in time, the Soviet Union put out a stamp that recognized the first anniversary of declaration of Ukrainian sovereignty. It's to the upper right and has a female on it. A few days later, a putsch occurred. Now, a putsch, this was an attempt by the regime to put down independence movements. Well, it failed, but alarm bells rang loud, and a few days after this, Ukraine's people voted for either independence or the status quo. When the results came in, the average vote for independence was 92.3%. All of Ukraine's oblasts voted yes, and the Crimean Autonomous Republic also voted yes. September of that year saw the Baltic states gain their independence as recognized by the United Nations, and so they were a few months ahead of the game. But then ultimately on the 26th, the USSR dissolved and the other 12 nations also gained their independence. Those 12 nations, however, decided to form kind of a free trade or semi-free trade association called the Commonwealth of Independent States. This is mentioned because this included some economic ties, one that affected postal fees. And we'll see the results of this as we continue through the slideshow. But just to sum up, there were two foreign types of mail fees: KISS fees and non-KISS fees. KISS fees were fees that were greatly reduced for the former nations upon USSR dissolution, and the fees for non-KISS nations, Canada, the United States, Australia, England, Poland, and others, was far more substantial than those for the KISS nations. Finally, on January the 2nd, we see the first tariff system for an independent Ukraine. Fees go for regular mail, from 5 kopecks to 50 kopecks in an independent Ukraine. Now, it is interesting to note that Russia is the only former USSR nation that started right off the bat with a modern and secure mint and print facility. After all, everything was centralized to the Russian part of the USSR. Yet they still saw their fees for regular domestic mail go from 5 kopecks to 30 kopecks. This despite a huge head start in a ready-made postal infrastructure. This map shows us Ukraine's 25 political constituent units, 24 oblasts, and the Crimean Autonomous Republic. I started to collect Canada in 1967, which was its centennial year, its 100th birthday. And when Ukraine gained its 1990s independence, I decided to collect them as well. Now, having done research, I came across certain catch terms that caught my eye and quotes as well. They're listed here. The ones that caught my eye the most were the two that are bolded. Tridents, tridents, tridents. Deja vu all over again. And any collector can see the beauty in this beast. The reason these two terms caught my eye was because they encouraged me to dive in to Ukraine's provisionals. Yes, I wanted to find out more about my heritage, and that was a motivating factor, I think, for most, if not all of us, when we start collecting a particular nation. However, there was also fascination with the beauty in this beast, and when you see some of the utilitarians and overprints as we run through this slideshow, you will understand. Now, Trident's deja vu all over again is not quite accurate. In fact, we can say no to that. The early 1900s classic era overprints were national emissions by decree. They were always with the tridents, and so they were not provisionals. We see 4 examples to the upper right. Most of them are on the arms of Russia, but then there are some others that are overprinted as well. And we see 4 different types of tridents here. Certainly, the 6 gubernias of Ukraine all created their own cliches, and when they used them on the stamps, this resulted in a number of varieties, trident varieties, and apparently there are over 1,500 types of these varieties. But at any rate, the 1990 stamps were local emissions. They substituted for national emissions by decree. They were not always with a trident, and generally they were indeed provisionals. Now, there was the challenge, what I call the 4 in 17 of 25. Of Ukraine's 25 political units, 17 made provisionals. And of these 17, only 4 had any kind of real marketing system. And only one of those 4 sold to the public through a relatively professional marketing program. In other words, they had catalogs. And that oblast was Chernivtsi. You can see the original catalog to the lower right. Now, of the other 8 oblasts that did not create their own utilitarians or overprints, they relied on national revalues, local revalues, cash register receipts, forms, and this type of thing. How long did the provisionals era during the 1990s last for Ukraine? When did it start? Well, the starting point is easy. It began with Ukraine's very first modern tariff system, which was January the 2nd, 1992, the beginning of Tariff 1. The not so easy part is determining an end point. And, this formal point is nebulous because of regional variance. Need varied from one area to the other, from urban centers to hinterland areas, from areas that were well provided for versus those that were not well provided for. And so an endpoint that is an exact date is rather nebulous. My best guess is that it began to end in September 1995, this according to statistics that show greatly diminished use. And then the very last known proper use was of a utilitarian, which was in March 1996. So the end point probably is a fadeaway, starting in September 1995 and finishing in March 1996. But without question, more study is going to be required. We do know that Ukrposhta opened up its doors for good in mid-1995, and so we have to consider those kinds of variables as well. But more study is required. Now, How many of these provisionals are there? Utilitarians and overprints. I had to establish some criteria because there were no prior studies on this in any great detail. I came up with the number 2,318. And people may certainly dispute the criteria I chose, for example, based upon color variance and papers and this type of thing, particularly with respect to utilitarians. But even if you do discount some of this criteria, the number total would probably be around 2,400, give or take. Now, the third part of this slide shows us percentage of production adjusted to tariff length. Each one of the 8 tariffs were different in length, and so you just can't take a raw number. You have to adjust it according to these varied lengths. And here are the percentages. You will note that the majority, almost 61%, of these provisionals were issued from June the 5th to December the 6th, 1993. And then we begin to see a real drop-off. 10% is still a fair amount, but for Tariff 7, you see just over 3%, and for Tariff 8, you see not even 1%. That is a significant drop-off. Now, I think it is safe to say that Ukraine's provisionals era more or less coincided with the use of the carbovignettes from early 1992 into mid-1996. Now, we have here a 1 kopyok penny to the left, and 100 of these kopyoks amounted to 1 carbovignettes singular, carbovignetsiv plural. As I go throughout this slideshow, I fall back on the term carbs when it comes to summarizing this currency. And at the point in time when Ukraine became a nation, at that very first moment on January the 2nd, 1992, the establishment of the first tariff and these monies, Ukraine's carbovignettes was pegged at 8 to 1 US dollar. And so we show to the far right a US $1 coin, and Ukraine's dollar amounted to that fraction of the coin, 1/8 of $1. Now, what's interesting to note, very important to keep in mind, was that Ukraine was coming off what had been a Soviet scales of economy. It was going to more real-world independent scales of economy. And up until then, the average Ukrainian worker was making about 350 US dollars per year, the equivalent of that. And there were some subsidies, additions here and there, but not many. So there you go. That's what Ukraine's money looked like starting 1992 and into early mid-1996. Now, why did Ukraine need local provisionals to begin with? Well, there are 2 primary reasons which are essentially structural, and there are 2 secondary reasons which are essentially socioeconomic. To the primary reasons, the most important was that there were no facilities in Ukraine. Under the old USSR system, everything was centralized, and so when it came to Ukraine, there were no modern and secure mint and print facilities located in Ukraine whatsoever. Everything was centralized elsewhere. Second, there was an inadequate distribution network to its post offices. Again, everything had been central and hierarchical to the Soviet Union, with Moscow at the top of the list and everything else in pyramidal order flowing downwards. And so when the countries gained their independence, they didn't always know who their boss was or who their subordinates were, what the supply chain was, what these various paths of communication were. So there was an inadequate distribution network. Secondary reasons, the socioeconomic ones, there was a need to repatriate what had been a Russified system. One look at these 4 cancels to the right shows you how and why. You've got one from Kyiv, which is bilingual Russian and Ukrainian, the first one. You've got the second one from Sambir. You can see this is Western Ukraine, more nationalistic than on average. So what they have done here is they have eradicated the CCCP and the star, hammer, and sickle. And in Sambir, Ukraine, it looks like Sambir is unilingual Ukrainian. They've even changed Lvov at the bottom. It looks like they've changed the O to an I simply by chiseling out part of the O. The third cancel is unilingual Russian. This is Mykolaiv in southwestern Ukraine. Really nowhere close to Russia, but a unilingual Russian cancel as late as November the 11th, 1994. And then finally, we've got a unilingual Ukrainian cancel in, of all places, Kharkiv. This at post office number 1, and everything in this cancel is Ukrainian. Now, so by mid-1995 or so, everything should have been reconfigured to the Ukrainian language, except for some eastern oblasts and the Crimean Autonomous Republic. Finally, inflation, hyperinflation. You saw that the Ukrainian Karbovanets was 8-1 compared to the US dollar at the beginning of 1992. Well, here at the end of 1993, it has degraded to 12,600 carbs to 1 US dollar. This is almost laughable. But if you think this is funny, worse is yet to come. How does this sort of thing affect postage? Well, here are 3 examples, and I guess I could have put a 4th in at the end of December 1991 to show that regular domestic was 5 kopecks. Now with the dawning of independence for a modern Ukraine beginning 1992, we see that it goes from 5 kopecks to a total franking of 50 kopioks. The first example there that was posted January the 28th. Actually a very beautiful cover and quite rare. 43 kopioks plus the 7 kopecks, which are now reconfigured to the Ukrainian standard as 7 kopioks. 43 plus 7 is 50, and it matched the required franking during this point in time in Ukraine. Fast forward to December the 14th, 1993, and the same quality of mail is now 100 Karbovancev, like $100. Here we have 2 stamps that were overprint, revalued to 50 Karbovancev a piece, and actually a pair, and of course 50 times 2 is 100, thus meeting the required in-era regular domestic rate. That one went from the city of Zaporizhia to Odessa, and finally, on the last example, in Tariff 8, June the 16th, 1995, yet again, regular domestic mail, but now at 5,000 Karbovancev. This is local city of Chernivtsi mail. So there you have it. This is how inflation, hyperinflation, affected postage in Ukraine. Can you imagine being the average person in Ukraine seeing this sort of trend happening? Here we have the tariffs laid out for us in order during the Ukrainian Provisional era of the 1990s, T1, Tariff 1, to T8, Tariff 8. And I've got the 3 sections, the 3 predominant sections: domestic, foreign KISS, which were the former Soviet nations upon USSR dissolution, and everybody else that's foreign, including directly adjoining countries like Slovakia and Poland, let alone Canada, USA, Australia, New Zealand, and everybody else. What we have here is a situation where hyperinflation dramatically impacted the length of these tariffs. The first one, 128 days, except for foreign others, the non-KISS nations, 188 days, 60 days longer. They made up for that with 60 days shorter for that section under Tariff 2. But the bottom line here is that there lacks coordination in the first 5 tariffs. They were only able to coordinate things starting with Tariff 6 when they took special measures. And that special measure was gearing foreign non-KISS mail as a percentage of the carbonets to United States dollar exchange. And they were supposed to do this daily, but it really ended up being periodically. In addition to those tariff indicators, I've also, just so that you have something to refer to, mapped out the regular domestic fees below each of those 8 tariff periods so you can see how they more or less exponentially increased. This slide gives us a more detailed look at the various tariff fees per tariff during the Provisionals era in Ukraine. Now, we have the time periods listed to the left per tariff. Next over are domestic rates. There is regular and then registered. Next over from that are foreign Commonwealth of Independent States. These are the former USSR countries upon the dissolution of the USSR. Does not include the Baltic states. And for these countries, we have regular surface and registered surface. Then regular air and registered air. And then similarly for all of the other foreign countries that are not KISS nations, the non-KISS nations, Canada, USA, Australia, England, Germany, Israel, etc. Poland even, as I've already emphasized a few slides ago. So we have regular surface for them, then registered surface for them, regular air, then registered air. And you can draw comparisons as you go up and down each of these columns. Note in their lower right corner that it tells us for foreign others to go to the next frame, essentially, for tariffs 6, 7, and 8. And this is because periodic adjustments were made sometimes on a weekly basis, sometimes on a bi-weekly basis, sometimes almost on a daily basis as they refine the system towards the end of Tariff 8. And so let's go to that next slide just to get a quick look at it. We noted that for this quality of mail starting Tariff 6, it was a periodic adjustment compared to the United States dollar. So, with the start of Tariff 6 on December the 6th, 1993, we see that the exchange is 12,610 to $1 US. For regular surface mail to any non-KISS nation, multiply the 12,610 by 15 by 0.15 and you come with the total of 1,892 carbonets. That is the precise franking that would be required on that day during this period of time for that quality of mail, regular surface mail to a non-KISS nation. And what quite often, in fact almost always happened, was they'd round these specific fees off to the sort of the next highest unit, next highest tens, 50s, sometimes even hundreds, and sometimes even more than that. So they'd probably charge this person coming in to do mailing on this specific day for this quality of mail, rather than 1,892 carbonets, they probably ask for 1,900. Airmail was 20% of the 12,610. That would be 2,522 on the button. But you see most covers with 2,500 or 2,520. And then registered surface and airmail rate. Registered surface would be 8,827. They often round it off to 8,900 and so forth. As you can see, September the 29th, under Tariff 8, the very last set of figures in the second column, 169,600 to 1. Ooh-wee! Now, very quickly, I am obliged in my own mind to do something with respect to what I call the KISS effect. Now, I believe, I can't find literature on this as of yet, or proof, but I believe that KISS Nation mail was greatly subsidized by non-KISS Nation mail. Remember, KISS nations are the 12 former Soviet nations upon dissolution, and non-KISS nation are all of the other countries on the planet Earth outside of this group of friendlies. Well, look at the rates for 1992. We have Russia, which directly adjoins Ukraine to the east and is a KISS nation. And then we have Poland, which directly adjoins Ukraine to the west, but is a non-KISS nation. 50 kopioks to Russia, 3.60 karbovantsiv to Poland. I consider this to be almost outrageous. They directly adjoin, both of them, but one is 7 times more. 1993 saw the rates to Russia of 15 karbovantsiv, but to Poland 70 karbovantsiv. This for regular mail. And in 1994, 250 to Russia, but 1,852 to Poland, probably rounded off to something like 1,900, and so on. Just to sum up and to be perfectly clear, it is my belief. I cannot find proof of this yet, but it is my belief that KISS Nation mail was in fact subsidized by the exorbitant rates charged when it came to non-KISS mail. Now, earlier we saw 4 variables that greatly affected the provisional era in Ukraine, 2 structural and 2 socioeconomic, and there are in fact a few others. And here they are. Number 5, what should we take as in-era meaning to this genre of stamp? Primarily because of hyperinflation and austerity. And I ask this question because you saw a tariffs chart which included 8 tariffs during this provisionals era. Not one of them lasted a year. Not one of them. And so a local may have created stamps for a given tariff period only to see it end, perhaps prematurely in their mind, but it ended. And so what are they going to do? Waste the stamps that they had just perhaps made a month or 2 earlier? No. They augmented and kept on using those stamps by adding another stamp to it to meet whatever the new given tariff rates were. So you will see franking that includes at times multiple stamps. Here is the largest valued stamp of all of the provisionals. It was issued in December 1993, intended for overage parcels, but you know what? This kind of stamp was good for domestic mail only by June 1995, this being in Tariff 8. So there's an example of how hyperinflation affected postage rates and why we have to very carefully consider what in-era means when it comes to this genre. Patriotism versus embarrassment. Need more be said? The stamp on the left was proudly used across the nation and internationally. But the 2 stamps on the right, similar imagery, and the overprint in particular, very sloppy appearing. There was kind of an unwritten rule. You don't use this sort of material on international non-KISS mail. Fraud. With hyperinflation came hyper fees. And now we have a piece here which, when mailed, when the regular domestic rate was 500 karbovantsiv to Russia from Ukraine, it includes stamps that are basement fabrications. The 2 stamps on the left are basement fabrications. Very nice looking as overprints, much better than the overprint above and to the right, but they're false. These 2 stamps made it through the mail, accounting for 300 karbovantsiv of the required 500 karbovantsiv total for this quality of mail. So 70% of this was fraudulent, and this affected Ukraine's postal system. And finally, mixed and rounded franking. With these hyperinflationary fees, 1,892, 9,825. Well, post offices, as was emphasized earlier, simply rounded off these types of figures. So you'll see rounded franking, and of course, as explained in number 5 above, a lot of mixed franking, and we have an example on the next slide. Here is a beautiful cover that was mailed from Chernivtsi, Ukraine to Toronto, Ontario on February the 13th, 1994. And this quality of mail, it is registered airmail, required a specific rate of 9,825 Karbovan-Siev, but the post office rounded up to 9,900. So we have rounded franking here, and we have mixed sets franking as well. You've got boxed set overprints, the 5 300 carb stamps to the upper left. You've got fauna of Bukovina stamps. This is the 300 stamp to the immediate right of the 5 box stamps, and the 2 fauna stamps to the lower left. And you've even got a pair of national definitives. It all adds up to 9,900 Karbovan-Siev, mailed in this era, rounded up from 9,823 carbs. Mixed set franking, rounded franking, mailed as non-KISS mail to Canada. All right, we've just about finished setting the table for this provisionals genre in Ukraine during the 1990s, and we're going to start looking at this era in chronological order. I do recognize the fact that this is a rather lengthy slideshow with narration, and however, there isn't much out there on this field, so I do apologize ahead of time, and I trust that you are watching this in segments at your own leisure. Here we go. Now, we know, and it has been stated on several occasions in past slides, that the USSR dissolved on the 26th of December 1991, and we have also stated that the first tariff system for an independent Ukraine started on January the 2nd. What did they do for that 1 week interim period? They depended upon the very last tariff era that existed for the USSR at the time. Here we have 2 examples of covers mailed in Ukraine during that 1 week period. The first is regular domestic that was posted on the 27th of December 1991. And if you take a look at this mangled cover, you see that someone is clearly making a statement by having eradicated the stationery stamp in the fashion that it has been mauled, and they are celebrating the independence of Ukraine with an apostrophe. This cover was manuscript annulled on the reverse during December the 27th, 1991. And the second example is regular foreign mail to Lithuania. Don't forget, the Baltic states separated a few months prior to this point in time, so they're now no longer a KISS nation. And aside from that, the tariff system had yet to have started for Ukraine. So they depended upon the existing tariff rates in USSR, as we have already said. So we see here 4 or 5 kopeck stamps, 20 kopecks from Ukraine to Lithuania. Now, groups of provisionals shown on the following frames. First of all, what are provisionals by definition? They are stamps made on short notice to provide issues that show formal change in government, currency, and for values, or in the case of these overprint provisionals, revalues, in short supply for new values established in a new tariff system. And they are locally created stamps. They are created by the province or state, a city. They are created by post offices groups. Sometimes they're created by a lone post office for themselves. All of this until Ukraine Post was up and running. Groups of 1990s Ukrainian provisionals include the following. Initially, there were revalued Soviet stamps, revalued to the Ukrainian standard. Two types, national and local. Those revalued at the national level, and then local revalues. Then, very shortly afterwards, utilitarian stamps appeared. These are the very basic looking stamps. They're almost all ungummed except for two sets. They are almost all one color except for one set. And they have imagery on them that appears to be meter stamps, surcharges, tax perks. This kind of simple imagery that was quick and easy for a local to fabricate at this point in time based upon the need for new postage rates. There were also meter and tax perk imprints directly hand stamped onto a cover. Now, I do not show this material in my exhibit. I only do stamps, but they are indeed part of this era. The third type were overprints. They came about in late March. All are gummed. Almost all are perforate. One stamp issue was imperforate, a mid to late 1991 former Soviet issue. And so about 50 stamps were used as platforms for overprinting. Almost all of them Soviet, some Ukrainian stamps, and we'll see a few shortly. And now, soon to evolve because of hyperinflation, were revalued Ukrainian stamps, revalued at the national and at the local level. We also begin to see pen manuscript directly on the cover. Again, I only do stamps, so I don't cover this in my exhibit, but again, they are part of this genre. We're now going to show you 5 covers that were national revalues of Soviet stamps. Now, these were automatic revalues, so a Kopek stamp became kopioks, and a ruble stamp became a karbovanets, or if it was more than 1 ruble, it would become karbovantsiv as plural. So now we have 2 covers examples here. One is domestic registered mail, and the other is KISS Nation registered mail. The first cover is the domestic. It was posted on September the 21st, 1992. This was during Tariff 2. And if you take a look at the cover, we have 3 10 Kopek stamps. They are now 10 kopioks each. We have a commemorative, and we have a Mykolaiv provisional, which we'll take a look at later on in this show. And all of them added up total to the required in-era franking of 1.5 karbovantsiv at this point in time, going from the city of Mykolaiv to the city of Kyiv. In the second cover, we have registered surface mail, KISS Nation mail, that is going from Ukraine to Minsk, Belarus. Minsk is the capital of Belarus. And again here, we have a revalued Soviet definitive, 13 kopecks now becomes 13 kopioks. We have a revalued stationary image, the 7 kopecks now becomes 7 kopioks. So 13 plus 7 is 20. And we have 130 kopioks worth on a utilitarian image. So 20 plus 130 is equal to the 1.5 karbovantsiv total franking for this quality of mail that was posted July the 12th, 1992. This during Tariff 2. Here are 2 covers that were mailed to non-KISS nations. The first cover is franked for surface mail, and the second cover is franked for air mail. Now, the regular non-KISS foreign surface mail cover, the one on the left, shows us the total franking of 3.6 karbovantsiv that was required for this quality of mail. And this one went on February the 14th, 1992, which was during Tariff 1, from the city of Kryvyi Rih to Scottsdale, Arizona. Now, the second cover, the one to the right, we see regular non-KISS foreign airmail. Not registered, both these covers are regular. This one was posted January the 17th, 1992, again, this being during Tariff 1. And you can see two high-value former definitive USSR stamps. The 2 ruble stamp, now at 2 Karbov-Siv, the 3 ruble, now at 3 Karbov-Siv, and 2 plus 3 equals the 5 Karbov-Siv that was required for this quality of mail going from Ukraine to the non-KISS nation of Canada. But it wasn't just 23 revalues for 23 months. By the way, that's quite a considerable period of time for Soviet imagery, isn't it? Right up until November 1993. Very generous of Ukraine to have allowed this length of time. But at any rate, it's not just 23 values for 23 months. Take a look at the stamps to the upper left of this cover. These are 1954 reprints of stamps that were originally put out in 1948 and 1949. 1954, the year I was born. And so it goes to show you how old these stamps are. Now, we know that the Soviet Union nullified all of the face values of their stamps up to March the 31st, 1961, but clearly the evidence in this cover shows that Ukraine disregarded what the USSR did in 1961. Here we have a cover where if you add up the reprints, the 1954 reprints, and the Lviv overprint revalues, the 4 stamps to the upper right, it totals to the required in-era franking for this quality of mail of 25 Karbov-Siv. This going from Lviv Oblast in Ukraine to Richmond Hill, Ontario, a city just north and a little bit east of Toronto. A beautiful cover. This is the oldest known USSR revalued issues on cover to date. This cover bears a stamp that has been locally revalued. The 5 kopek stamp was revalued to 50 kopyuks by the city of Makeyevka, which is in Donetsk Oblast, in order to meet the required in-era fee for regular domestic mail during Tariff 1. And more specifically, this cover was mailed from Makeyevka to Kyiv on the 21st of April, 1992. Now, not only that, but this particular cover, if you look at the upper left, you'll see a faded violet hand stamp. It reads as meaning revalued in Russian. And so what they have done here was to pair the revalue at a local level up with this indication for the recipient oblast so that they realize that it in fact was revalued at the local level. Otherwise, the recipient oblast may have sent it back because of insufficient postage or required postage due or some kind of combination such as that. Very interesting, and I think it says something about the communication system at this point in time in Ukraine, just after the collapse of the USSR. Now, I think that the national level more or less tolerated local revaluation because just before the breakup of the Soviet Union, a whole bunch of these low-value stamps were dumped in various post offices around the USSR. So select post offices got stuck with these stamps and they decided to start local revaluation. It is not all that easy for collectors of Ukrainian postal history such as myself to come by one of these locally revalued covers because they were in fact only for domestic mail purposes. So to come by one of those is something of an achievement for people such as us on this side of the ocean. This list shows us all of the applications that were in fact revalued during this period of time in Ukraine at the local level. We see 14 applications here. The first 11 are definitives. The 12th and the 13th are radio tax revenues, all from the former USSR. And the 14th stamp is a Ukrainian Cinderella that was used by the city of Konotop in Sumy Oblast. Wonderful. At any rate, you can see that there are up to 30 cities that completed local revaluation. Now, while I do not exhibit direct hand stamps per se, they are part of this genre, and so here are some examples. The first is a meter type direct hand stamp. It's at 95 kopioks, and that, along with the 5 kopiok pre-stationary, added up to the required in-error rate for this domestic regular mail during Tariff 2. A meter type impression, and then on the second example, we have postal stationery. It came with a 1 Karbovanets Ukrainian image stamp, but has been augmented with a tax perk direct hand stamp in the middle, running from down to up. It is domestic registered mail that was posted on the 22nd of August 1993, this during Tariff 4, and the total of 17 is pen manuscripted in the TP, plus the 1 image, the 1 Karbovanets image, added up to 18 carbs as total franking for this quality of mail. In Ukraine, with time and hyperinflation, we began to see modifications of direct franking and direct hand stamping. Here are 2 examples. The first cover has a tax perk image, and in the tax perk image we see manuscripted the franking total of 301 Karbovanets. Now, this is regular airmail to Canada during Tariff 4, and the fee for this quality of mail at that time was 300 carbs. Why the extra 1 carb? I speculate now that this was the fee charged to the person that posted this mail for the cover. They probably came out in without any kind of envelope, and so this was the charge. Post offices, being tight for money at this point in time in Ukraine, charged 1 carb for the cover. Thus, the total of 301 Karbovanets as mailed regular airmail to Canada from Ukraine. The second cover, why bother with a hand stamp? Let's just write down TP 2520. And that, in fact, is what this particular postal clerk decided to do. It saved time, and it is tied by a cancel to the envelope. So there is no question that this pen manuscripted fee was written prior to the cover being posted. This one was posted during Tariff 6 on the 24th of December 1993, just before Christmas time, and it totaled 2,520 carbs, rounded from 2,522. And not only is it tied by a Ukrainian cancel, that is the hand manuscripted fee, but we can see jet spray across the top as well. This is clearly as the result of having arrived in Canada. While Ukraine did not have any modern and secure mint and print facilities, they did try their best at the national level. They contracted foreign stamp firms to print stamps for them, which they eventually issued in Ukraine. Here we see 2 examples. The first set of definitives were the ones that show the female profile on it. These were known as the allegoricals, and it was a set of 8 that was issued in May and June of 1992. The second definitive set that they issued was called the ethnographics. They are the 6 stamps that you see here with the scenery in the background. So when these stamps were issued, their face values meant something, but of course, over time with hyperinflation, they became less and less meaningful until they were virtually meaningless to any kind of mail. There were millions of these stamps in Ukraine's National Ukrposhta vaults and at local post offices. What do you do with virtually meaningless stamps? You revalue them. Through decree, Ukraine withdrew what you see as the set of 8 at the top here, comprised of all of the allegorical sets. They withdrew them in May and early June, and then sent them back to post offices with temporary revalues, only to shortly later issue a decree which allowed post offices to start selling and using these stamps at the values that you see at the bottom of each image. And this began August the 5th, 1994. They did the same sort of thing for the ethnographics. And you can see their revalues, which began June the 15th, 1995, except for the free stamps that have different dates at the bottom of set 2. One slightly earlier and another 2 slightly later. And the slightly later ones were allegoricals that were again revalued for this set 2 of revalues. So now, if you're a person at a bourse and you're trying to figure out if one of these covers mailed at this point in time is a good cover, would you be able to instantaneously figure out that it is good or bad? Not me. I'd need the paperwork with me. This made for very, very interesting times for postal history in Ukraine. These two covers begin to give us an idea of what we meant by very, very interesting Ukrainian postal history. The first cover includes set 1 revaluation, and the key in both covers is the blue 5-carb stamp that has been revalued in both cases. In the first cover, the 10-carb stamp is revalued to 1,000 carbs. The 5-carb stamp is now at 500 carbs. So 1,000 plus 1,000 plus 500 totaled to the required in era as rounded 2,500 carb. The actual rate was 2522 at this time, but in this case it was rounded off to 2,500 carbs. And it met the required in-era rate for regular airmail from Lviv to Canada during Tariff 7. Now, on to the next cover. Here we see set 2 revaluation. The 5-carb stamp has been revalued yet again to 5,000. So it was 5 carbs with its original face value. It then became revalued to 500 carbs during set 1, and it is yet again revalued during set 2 to 5,000 carbs, which met the required in-era fee for this quality of mail at this point in time. 5,000 carbs total going from the city of Volyn to the city of Mykolaiv. Don't you think this is fascinating? Do you think that you'd be able to do without the paperwork when you're at a bourse looking at covers such as this? And if you think those two covers were interesting, check this one out. When Set 2's revalued stamps became effective in June 1995, they added to the Set 1 revaluations, and so both sets worked in conjunction with each other, the allegoricals and the ethnographics, all together, all at once. And we have a covers example here that demonstrates this. We have a Set 1 revalue of the red 10-carb stamp to 1,000 carbs, and we have Set 2 revaluation of the 2 green stamps from 50 carbs to 2,000 carbs, the pre-stamp being ignored because it's out of date now. This was regular domestic mail from the cities of Horlivka to Donetsk, posted on September the 18th, 1995, the total franking of 5,000 carbovensiv, meeting the required in-era fee for this quality of mail at that time. A wonderful find of a cover. Rumors had been floating around in Ukraine during the mid and late 1990s about Ukrainian stamps that had been pen manuscript revalued for use as postage on given items that were sent through the mail system. Finally, we saw an article verifying this that was published in the Ukrainian Philatelic journal by chief editor V. Anolenko. It showed a Krasilivsky rarity postal card with a hand manuscript revalued 50 carb ethnographic, now revalued to 5,000 Karbovensiv, thus satisfying the required in-error rate for this quality of mail during Tariff 8. What a wonderful find. Now, let's fast forward to the year 2017, when the cover to the right was discovered in a lot of covers. Here we have a very busy looking cover, several stamps on it, lots of ink, lots of postal markings. But if you look very carefully to the center left of this cover, you will see two allegorical Ukrainian stamps with the top halves covered up by another stamp that were revalued to 3,000 Karbovensiv each. All of the franking on this cover, including the hand manuscript revalued allegorical stamps, added up to the required in-error fee for this quality of mail, registered airmail from Ukraine to Canada, at a total 9,522 Karbovensiv. This during Tariff 6, and more specifically posted on February the 17th, 1994. A beautiful uncovery and a real Chernivtsi rarity. Now, why would they have done this? Well, I think the answer lies in the following timeline. December the 6th, 1993 saw Ukraine go to fees adjusted periodically for this kind of mail, non-KISS international mail. We did not see Ukraine revalue their national definitives until no earlier than August the 5th, 1994. This cover was mailed in February of 1994, before that point in time. Further, Ukraine did not issue their third set of definitives, which were alphabet definitives, that would account for these kinds of exorbitant values on non-KISS mail. This did not happen until June 1994. So this cover was in this no zone, this 6-month period of time when there was no such postage that it could account for this kind of rate. We are now at a point where we begin to discuss the locally produced utilitarian and overprint provisionals of the 1990s in Ukraine. Now, just to be clear, it is not the mandate for international catalogs such as Scott and Michel to list local issues. They leave that up to specialist catalogs, which are referred to in the citation at the end of this slideshow. Though Michel does include the original overprints of Kyiv, Lviv, and Chernihiv as national standard issues. And many people consider them to be national just because of their very nature as having been the very first of their kind, heralding a new independent Ukraine, and insofar as the quality of those particular overprints are concerned. First up, insofar as locally created and issued provisionals were the utilitarians, allowed through decree by Ukraine starting January the 14th, 1992. So we have 4 examples here and some written and unwritten rules at the bottom of this frame. The first up is Sumy Oblast's tax perk image. Use started February the 4th, 1992, and as you can see, it's very simple or simplistic. It's got a P and a K and a TP on it. The P for ruble, the K for kopeck, and TP, of course, for tax perk. So this is a tax perk image. Next up is a meter style image issued by Ivano-Frankivsk's main post office starting August the 6th, 1993. Beautiful, very well designed meter type image. You have a rather ornate frame line on the outer edges that imitate perforations, within which is Ukraine Post in Ukrainian, Ukraine's symbol, the trident, Ukrainian value at 12 Karbovensiv, and Ivano-Frankivsk at the bottom of the stamp in Ukrainian. The next over is a Mena district meter type image that was issued sometime in October of 1993. Mena district is in Chernihiv Oblast, and we'll talk about this image in a moment. Very simple, blunt. And to the far right, we've got a beautiful utilitarian that was issued by Chernivtsi Oblast on November the 2nd, 1993. It's got local imagery and local text. Now, let's look at the rules that are written and unwritten at the bottom. New designs to include a national symbol or suitable regional icon image. Use of the Ukrainian language and monetary denomination. Include some kind of security feature or practice and be clear and tidy. All right, let's go across again. The Sumy Oblast Taxburg image. Simple, blunt, unfortunately in the Russian language, but this is very early, the second month of independence for Ukraine. So maybe we can give them a little bit of leeway there. And the security practice was application by postal clerks, and with the hand manuscript value being put on this taxburg by the postal clerks as well. And then they would fix this onto the mailed item that was being posted. Simplistic, still in archaic text, but at least they have a security feature that safeguards the sanctity of this particular utilitarian. Ivano-Frankivsk, a very complex meter type image that was available in the post office and as mint stamps for Ukrainians that were philatelists that wanted to buy these. It is in a kind of ink and design that is extremely difficult to imitate, either through photocopy or through remanufacture in the basement at home. The third image, very blunt. If you look carefully, it's not so clear, but if you look carefully, you'll see the word Postage at the top. You'll even see KPB, which is Karbovantsiv at the bottom. Tough to see that, but you can see it. And of course the 50, the value of 50 Karbovantsiv is fairly clear in the middle. Not a very handsome utilitarian, is it? And of course this is magnified so we can see it more easily. Under normal circumstances, this image is far smaller. And then finally, the Chernivtsi image. The security feature is migratory ink. So if anyone tried to soak this off postage that had already gone through the mail system, most of this ink would become smudged, watered down, smeared, and really it would be quite clear that the stamp could no longer be used. It is said that this value was issued outside of Ukraine in order to stunt the ability of philatelists to collect over the counter most of this set. Whether that is true or not is another story, but that is what is said about that particular stamp. I had been mulling over what one word or phrase would best describe these types of provisional stamps. Surcharge images, meter type images, tax perk images, simplistic images. And then it dawned on me one day, whilst reading the concise Oxford Dictionary, of course, that the most appropriate use of a phrase would include the word utilitarian, hence utilitarian provisional stamps. We see here that the definition of utilitarian means designed to be useful for a purpose rather than attractive, severely practical. And there is no better word to describe this kind of a provisional than this word utilitarian and this phrase utilitarian provisional stamps. Perfect. On we go. And we mentioned just a moment ago that only 2 utilitarian provisional sets came gummed, and here they are. The first stamp is from Mykolaiv, and the second stamp is from Yalta. And in fact, the Yalta stamp is actually quite nicely designed. And how were these stamps gummed? That's right. They used box wrapping paper. Isn't that ingenious? At any rate, I suppose that they had a lot of this in their stock room. Utilitarian stamps do come with their varieties, And here are 3 examples. First up is a set from Rivne, the long surcharges. They were completed in violet ink on thin white paper, and we see a pair here in Tetbesh fashion. The 200 carb offensive on the left is upside down, and the 100 carb is right side up on the right. And now, if you take a look at the ink, these were always completed in violet. You will see that one stamp is of better visual quality than the other because of the density of ink. Most of the utilitarians were completed through hand stamping. And it is really not a good idea to consider density of ink as a variety, because otherwise, in cases of hand stamps, it would be never ending. Now, the second example is from Kyiv. It is an 80 kopeyok stamp that was completed on thin white paper, and it's a meter type impression. And what we see on this stamp is 2 symbols. The first one is a sealed envelope, and the second one is the post horn. The post horn was very popular as symbology on stamps in Eastern Europe, so that's not out of the ordinary, but the wax sealed envelope is. I believe that this is the only set of provisionals in Ukraine that included this kind of symbol on it. And now, that having been completed on thin white paper, we move over to the right and check out Kharkiv's example for a 500 carb offensive stamp. This one was completed on the backside of an insurance form, Form F17, but postcards were used and thin white paper was also used. Now, you can see how thick this cardboard is by the fact that I have to curl it with my hand. In the case of these stamps, one was completed in the left corner, then the card was rotated 90 degrees and a second stamp was completed, rotated 90 degrees again and a third stamp completed, and then 90 degrees yet again to come full cycle, and the fourth and final stamp was completed. If the cardboard is ribbed, we would have a further variety, horizontal and vertical ribbed stamps. So there's 3 examples for you. Thin white, thick light beige cardboard, and long surcharges that are on thin white paper in violet ink and in Tetbesh fashion. I don't know how you describe the Kharkiv example in terms of its orientation. When Ukraine gained its modern independence, a committee was struck in order to determine what the official name of the newly independent Ukraine would be. And of course, after 2 weeks, they came up with the name Ukraine. However, during that 2-week period of time, it was business as usual. Companies could not wait for them to come up with this official name, and so the post office put together these tax perk wrappers, and they used the name the Republic of Ukraine. You can see this down between the 2 doubled lines. It says Respublika Ukraina, Kiev, Pochtamt. It's in Russian. The Republic of Ukraine, Kiev, Post Office. And the first wrapper, used for newsprint that was mailed to Canada, is week number 27s. We see this from the N27 in the upper right-hand corner. In the other wrapper, the one mailed to the United States, it says N36, and so that was week number 36s. It is wonderful to see that people had the foresight to hang on to these items, realizing that, you know what, there's something new here. Here we see the very first stamps made in Ukraine for use in Ukraine in 70 years. These are Kyiv Post Office 1 utilitarians, and a blown up image is to the upper right. It is on, I guess, what you would call mid-beige brown card. And you can clearly see, if you take a decent look at the image, that This stamp consists of 3 zeros that were pen manuscripted to 9s. So it reads 999 kopioks. This was assumed to be 1,000 kopioks, or 10 Karbovantsiev. This particular image could not accommodate 4 numerals, only 3, and so they assumed that 999 was 1,000, or 10 Karbovantsiev. Now the cover has 4 of these stamps on it, along with 3 national definitives on the reverse, 2 national definitives on the front, a hand-stamped impression, and pre-station imagery. It all adds up to 70 Karbovantsiev, and this is express mail. Now, we do not fully know what the rates were over the given tariffs during this period of time in Ukraine for the Provisionals era. We're going to have to commit to further study and come up with firm figures, which will probably be achieved through empirical evidence. A beautiful cover. Here is another utilitarian stamp from the same set as that on the prior slide, except this is a lighter beige card and the imagery includes 3 9s. And again, the 999 kopiok was considered through protocol to be 10 Karbovantsiev. Now we see a rather interesting arrangement for 2 of these stamps on one piece in the lower left of the cover. They overlap each other, and they are indeed tied by the pink hash marks. The first of the 5 pink hash marks just barely ties that piece onto the cover, which is quite a bonus actually, given the position of these stamps on that cover. We have a hand stamp at 450 kopiok. We have the pre-station image at 50 kopiok. And we have another stamp, a 1 kopek stamp. Of course, it's now in Ukraine, 1 kopiok. Sometimes post offices applied this in lieu of the fact that the imagery for the utilitarian stamps was only 999 rather than 1,000. They didn't always put a 1 kopek stamp on the cover, but sometimes they did, and in this case, they obviously did. It all adds up to the required in-error rate of 25 Karbovantsiev for this quality of mail going from Ukraine to Canada, regular airmail posted during Tariff 2. A beautiful cover. A few weeks later, the city of Kyiv decided to come out with a set of stamps on thin white paper that were in Karbovantsiev. So we see a set of 7 here, ranging all the way from 1 Karbovanets to 50 Karbovantsiev. And they were, as mentioned, completed on thin white paper. They were minted by a canceling machine with common use until September the 9th, 1993. They were issued on January the 1st, 1992. Quantities are unknown, although one German source suggests 1,100 complete sets. We see a cover that was posted July the 17th, 1993, this during Tariff 4, from the cities of Kyiv to Zhytomyr, and the total 9 Karbovantsiev completed the required in-era fee for this quality of mail, regular domestic, at this point in time in Ukraine. Here is a set of 8 utilitarians that was issued by Kharkiv District Post on January the 24th, 1992. Now, this set holds quite a distinct honor, if you want to call it that, because they were withdrawn after only 5 days' use, and their values were annulled at that point in time. 5 days and 4 nights of use. Looking at each of the stamps, we know that they are in kopecks and rubles because of the last 2 stamps. There is a P between the 1 and the 10 and the 1 and the 20, and the P, of course, is a Cyrillic R, which stands for rubles. So this Oblast has not quite yet caught up with the times here in Ukraine. They're still using Russian denomination, and these have traces of the Russian language in them as well. The ornate ONC running from top to bottom in the background of the stamps stands for Ottaleni Sviazi, which in Russian means Communications Department. Now, the stamps of this set were completed individually by hand. And so in a paint of 100, you could probably come up with close to 100 varieties if you really needed to or wanted to. Well, for example, let's take a look at stamps 1 in the upper left corner and stamp 91 in the lower left corner. Stamp 1, we see that the O and the C meets the left frame line of the stamp. And in stamp 91, we see that it is away from that frame line, but instead almost meeting the right frame line. There are all sorts of differences such as this on a given pane of these Kharkiv utilitarians. Now, further to this, we can see that the artist or artists piggybacked from one value for the next. For example, look at the 46 Kopek stamp. You can clearly see that the 6 was a 3 at one point in time. Then they just erased and sketched in to turn the 3 into a 6. They used one of the 43 Kopek stamps from a given pane. Oh, by the way, look at the background of the stamp again. See those little black and dark gray flecks? Looks like they did build in security featuring after all. So I suppose it was public outrage which really caused the withdrawal and annulment of these stamps. It is a privilege of mine to be able to show you a commercial cover in era with these OC Kharkiv stamps on them. Here we have a cover that's got a pre-stationary image, 2 of the OC values, and an imperf 2 Kopek stamp revalued to 2 kopioks. It all adds up to the required in-era fee of 1 karbonets for this quality of mail during Tariff 1 for registered commercial. A beautiful cover. And if you think this is something, here is an overage cover that was mailed from Kharkiv to Uzbekistan, its capital Tashkent, on the first day of issue for these OC provisionals. We see 2 pairs on this overage cover, a pair of 50s and a pair of 45s. Of course, that adds up to 1.9 carb-offensive, and the breakdown is as follows. The first carb was for the initial 20 grams, and additional 30 kopioks was for every further 20 gram increment. And in this case, that added up to 90 kopioks more, thus equaling 1.9 carb-offensive for this quality of mail at this point in time from Kharkiv to Uzbekistan. Just a simply outstanding item. Now we have the identification code shown in the upper right. This is lifted from the back of the cover. Clearly you can see that these covers were manufactured in 1986 and they cost companies 3 kopecks apiece. Here we have lifted the 2 pairs so that you could see the cancel better that overrides those stamps, and then the cancel has been lifted from the stamps themselves, and we can see that the cancel says the 24th of January 1992 at 1500 hours. A simply spectacular item and quite possibly and quite probably unique. Here are tax perk utilitarians that we saw earlier in this presentation. They are the Sumy Oblast utilitarians that were issued by them on February the 4th, 1992. And we see here a very simple layout, printed by photocopy machine onto standard white paper. Quantities are unknown. because the post office completed them based upon an as required basis throughout the year. And they were in common use until January the 5th, 1993, which was the end of Tariff 2. And we've already talked about the security practice that these stamps were handled only by postal clerks. Now, they were completed on mini panes of 2 by 2. And a single mint stamp is extremely scarce. This one was acquired by a philatelist only well after these stamps were no longer being used by the post office in Sumi. Utilitarians of this quality really weren't supposed to be used on international non-KISS mail, but we get away with one here. And this, in fact, is a very important cover for a reason that'll be shortly explained. But first, we see one of the stamps from Sumy Oblast on the cover, pen manuscripted to 4.5 Karbovantsiv, and that along with the 50 Kopyuk image adds up to 5 Karbovantsiv, which was the required in-error rate for this quality of international non-KISS airmail during Tariff 1, and more specifically on February the 4th, 1992. Now, specialized texts suggest that this stamp was released for use during March 1992, but clearly we see it to be otherwise. Not only do we see the front cancel at February the 4th, but we see a back cancel at February the 21st. So specialist textbooks are going to have to reconsider this issue date. A beautiful cover. A few weeks after the Karbovantsiv set of 6 was issued by the city of Kyiv, they came out with a second set of on-white provisionals, a set of 15 Kopyuk and Karbovantsiv values. Now, these were printed by cancel machine, just as the first set was, and again on thin white paper, but of the fluorescent type this time around. And this set was used by Kyiv and nearby cities. Here are what these stamps look like when under UV light to show them fluorescing. We've got 2 covers under normal light. The first one has 2, 3, and 1, 5 Karbovantsiv stamps on it. And the second cover has 2 pairs of 300 Karbovantsiv stamps. Now, under UV light, you see them augmented through fluorescing. Not only that, but we see tagging bars fluorescing as well, and some markings on the second pair of 300 carb stamps on the open cover. Interesting. Now, I would suggest that because post offices used whatever paper was at hand in the post office at any given time, there was no intended pattern of paper type usage. So it is tough enough to collect all the values in a given set, let alone going to the more intrinsic issues with respect to philately, such as fluorescence, which in this case really is secondary to collecting all of the values. Well, we get lucky again. Here is a non-KISS Nation internationally mailed cover with, yet again, utilitarians on it. This is non-KISS airmail that was posted during Tariff 1 from the city of Kyiv to Detroit, Michigan, USA. And it was posted on March the 6th, 1992 with 5 1 Karbovanets stamps from the set of 15. The 5 stamps added up to the total required franking for this quality of mail at that time of 5 Karbovantsiv. And you can clearly see that the 50 Kopek / 50 Kopyuk stamp from the stationery was ignored. Now, we're kind of doubly lucky here because it is also machine canceled, not only on the front, but also on the back. So again, machine cancels, if you see them on utilitarian covers for this genre, grab it while you can. We have a dated cancel on the front, of course, for March the 6th, 1992. It arrived in Wurtsboro, New York on March the 14th, 1992. So a pretty rapid delivery from Ukraine to United States of America. A very nice cover. This is a very exciting cover for several reasons. But first, to the basics. This is a cash register receipt utilitarian. These were used in Ukraine from March 1992 to about June of 1995. This particular CRR is from Zhytomyr Post Office number 29. It was for a regular domestic posting mailed on April 9th, 1993 from the cities of Zhytomyr to Kyiv, and the 3 Karbovantsiv total on the CRR satisfied the required fee for this kind of mail at that time. You'll see the fee as 3.00 to the lower right of the CRR, and the other number 3 is the machine that the receipt came out of, and then the 0757 is the transaction number up to that point in time during this year. Now, we are lucky in that we have a CRR here that is on yellowish paper. Zhytomyr Post Office 29 started using this yellowish paper for their CRRs in April of 1993. This cover was mailed April the 9th, so this is a very early mailing for this quality of CRR paper. And not only that, but the cash register receipt is tied to the cover. It wasn't all that necessary to do this because the date was automatically transferred onto the CRR by the cash register machine itself, and we see that here on this receipt. In the middle to the right, 090493. And not only that, but this is a machine cancel that ties the receipt to the cover. So all sorts of exciting events tied up with this cover. I can only imagine that CRRs were favored by post offices across Ukraine because it meant money into the machine and the CRR out, and then the post office clerk glues it on to the item being mailed. Money in, receipt out. Quite decent security in terms of financial stability and accountability. A couple of months after Ukraine allowed locals to create their own utilitarians for postal use, they finally allowed the overprinting of former Soviet stamps. Now, this was through decree, and it began on March the 25th, 1992. We have some unwritten rules at the bottom, much like we did with the creation of utilitarians at the local level, and we have 3 examples here. So let's run through the 3 examples and see what we see. The first overprint was completed by Chernivtsi Oblast and was issued on August 1992. The middle stamp was a commemorative originally issued by the USSR in November 1978. So you can see that this particular stamp hung around for quite a period of time in the coffers in Mykolaiv Oblast, and they finally pulled them out of their coffers and overprinted them for their local use. And then finally we have a third example, not on a Soviet stamp. It is on a Ukrainian stamp. This was issued by Borodyanka in March 1994. Now, I'm not quite sure whether Ukraine really agreed with their own stamps being overprinted. Perhaps they just tolerated this until they finally revalued their allegoricals the following August. At any rate, let's take a look at the written and unwritten rules, so to say, that are listed at the bottom. Override the prior Soviet symbol with the trident or a substitute Ukrainian icon almost always of local nature. So the Chernivtsi example. Yes, the trident overrides the former Soviet symbology below it, and yes, the revalue nicely overrides the former Soviet value. And there is the overprint by itself. And what's interesting about this overprint is that the revalue uses Ukraine traditional numerals, the stylized 1 and the 0 with the dash at the top of it. Quite nice looking. Mykolaev's issue for February 1993 has enough space to not only include a trident and the revalue, but also the name. Both of those stamps are quite tidy appearing, in my opinion. However, can the same be said for the third example? Not really. This Borodiyanka set was completed through hand stamp 1 by 1. So this may explain the sloppy appearance of these overprints compared to the first two, which were completed by lithography. Try to include some kind of security feature. I would suggest that the first two stamps are of such a fine nature that it would be extremely difficult for people to master those overprints in their basement, particularly when it came to the Ukraine traditional numerology on the first stamp. However, the third stamp, the overprinted Ukrainian stamp, well, it's vague enough that a person could probably complete hand-stamped fabrications in their basement that would pass through the postal system. Just a guess there. And finally, try to be neat. Yes for number 1, yes for example 2, not yes for example 3. Yes, we have varieties when it comes to overprints as well. Now we're going to start at the bottom. We've already talked about the Ukraine traditional numerals. Those are to the lower left. But in terms of trident types, let's take a look at the boxed in tridents right at the bottom. We have a sloppy trident to begin with. We have a hollow trident. We have solid tridents. We have thick tridents. In terms of the revalues, we have very sloppy revaluation. The sloppy trident and revalues are from the Melitopol series of overprints. We have tidy revaluing from that point forward. We have a space between the dash and the 0, no space between the dash and the 0. We have different font type for the 2 zeros on the third last stamp in the revalue. We have a shifted revalue compared to the trident on the last example. You'll see that the 10 carbon-offensive is slightly shifted to the left. In terms of the stamps, look at the stamp in the upper left corner, a ghost print. Ghost prints usually happen in the first 2 or 3 rows of an overprinted pane of 100 that then became a sheet once overprinted, a Ukrainian sheet. We have inverts. We have glossy ink. I call this lustrous red overprint ink in the middle. We have flat black overprint ink to the right and in the center. You got 2 different numeral styles and 2 different trident styles, and this is the Melitopol trident and revalue that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. We have block of 4 singles with local heraldic icons. So yes, indeed, there are varieties when it comes to overprints. Overprinting was completed in any one of 3 ways: lithography, hand stamping, and typography. Now on the left side of this slide, we see a mother plate. It's a lithographic plate for Kyiv 6, number 53, and that's what specialists know this pattern on the plate as. It is in excellent shape. Don't forget, this thing is 25 years old and made of very thin aluminum. Now, how did this work? Well, you see the punched holes at the top and the bottom. This plate was rolled around a cylinder and attached with those punch holes. The positive imagery on the plate would pick up the ink, would transfer this ink onto another roller, a rubber cylinder, and the rubber cylinder would then transfer the ink onto the pane that's being overprinted and turned into a Ukrainianized sheet. We also have a make-ready sheet. These were examples that were shown to potential clients so that they could see what the pattern would look like outside of all of the busy action in the background. So this one was for Chernivtsi, and it was the 5 Karbovensiv value for the first set of overprints, which were ultimately completed in brownish ink. Now, other ways that overprinting was completed was through hand stamping, and we saw a Borodianka example just a bit ago, and then through typography. And in fact, we will see a typographic example later on in this exhibit. The first out of the gate for overprinting was this 11 value set of 34 that was issued by Kyiv Oblast starting March the 25th, 1992. Interestingly, the day that permission was granted for locals to be able to overprint stamps for local use. At any rate, this set was issued over a prolonged period of time during Tariff 1, March the 25th and the 30th, April the 2nd, and finally July the 4th, which was only effective in Tariff 1 for international non-KISS mail. Now, the stamp that was issued on July the 4th were the two 5 Karbovensiv stamps, stamps numbers 25 and 26. And oh, by the way, this is the fee that was charged for international non-KISS mail that was sent by air. I wonder if there are any covers out there with one of these stamps on them that is international non-KISS airmail. Wouldn't that be something? A 4-day window for that, July the 4th to July the 8th. At any rate, we have a set of 34 because of variety, hollow shield, solid shield, and so forth. And ultimately, this set is defined by the issue with the lowest mintage. That would be stamp number 32 at 586 total. And so there can be only 586 complete sets of 34. These were completed by lithography with a 10 by 10 image plate, and they were in common use until September the 9th, 1993. This cover includes postal stationery. It's got a 7 kopyok Ukrainian stationery stamp, and along with the 4 overprints from the set prior, 43 kopyoks, 3 Karbovensiv, 1 Karbovenets, and 50 kopyoks, it all adds up to the required in-era rate right on the button for this quality of mail at 5 Karbovensiv. Foreign non-KISS regular airmail during Tariff 1, mailed on June the 18th, 1992, Kyiv to Silver Spring, Maryland, USA. Quite an interesting cover. We clearly have here a commemorative cover and stamp combination. And the stamp, which is near identical to the cachet on the cover, is united to the cover with a first day cancel for July the 25th, 1992. Interestingly, this is augmented with Kyiv overprints, 3 of them to the top center, also dated on July the 25th, one of which is an invert. The 1 Karbovenets center stamp is an invert. Now, normally you have to be very careful with inverts, but in all likelihood, this cover is completely legitimate because of its very early mailing. It was mailed in Tariff 2 on July the 25th, 1992, and the total franking of 45 Karbovensiv met the required in-era fee for this quality of mail. Foreign non-KISS register airmail, Kyiv to Brooklyn, New York, USA. Further interesting is the fact that in the registry area they forgot to put a number down. Interesting. This rather interesting cover is domestic registered commercial mail posted during Tariff 1, and more specifically on the 20th of April 1992, and mailed from the city of Kamianets-Podilsky to a Nadvirna fuel company, so clearly commercial. Now it bears a 1 ruble Pochta Ukraina stamp, so all in Russian. They have yet to catch up with the times here in Ukraine, but at any rate, the 1 Karbovanets valued stamp met the required in-error rate for this quality of mail during Tariff 1 at this point in time. Interestingly, this stamp is from a set of stamps that Kamianets-Podilsky District Post issued, but all of the rest of the stamps were issued in Tariff 2. This is the only one that was issued in Tariff 1. Further to that, we have 2 interesting cancels on this cover. We've got a cancel on the front, April the 20th, 1992, and on the back, a receiving cancel, April the 23rd, 1992. Established specialists' texts say this was issued in June of 1992, and so clearly they are going to have to reconsider their issue date as stated. A very nice domestic registered commercial cover. This 9 Kopyok values set of 13 was issued by Mykolaiv Oblast on May the 11th, 1992. Now, of course, we've already seen that this is an interesting point during 1992 because Tariff 1 ended for domestic and KISS Nation mail on the 9th of that month, but it carried on for international non-KISS mail until July the 8th during Tariff 1. So is it possible that one of these stamps is on that kind of mail? International non-KISS mail? You never know. Utilitarians such as this were not supposed to be put on that kind of mail, but you just never know. Now, we have 13 stamps in this set because 3 values are on 2 different paper types, and another value is not only on 2 different paper types, but also bears 2 different numeral types. That would be the second and third stamp. The Kopyoks, the first one, the second stamp says 050 Kopyoks, and the third one says 50 Kopyoks. So there is variety with respect to paper color as well as numeral variety. And don't forget the highest value in this set is 900 Kopyoks, which is equal to 9 Karbovantsiv. They were printed by rotary press on various paper. Quantities are unknown, and they were in common use until September 1993. This is domestic regular mail that was posted during Tariff 4, more specifically on June the 14th, 1993, and it was mailed from the city of Mykolaiv to the city of Kyiv. The required 9 Karbovantsiv franking for this quality of mail was met by the 2 450 Kopyok stamps, and 450 Kopyoks is 4.5 Karbovantsiv. 4.5 times 2 is 9. Now we see the 2 paper varieties for the 450 Kopyok value utilitarian on this particular cover. Here's another group of stamps that was issued during that very interesting point in time during 1992. These are 50 Kopyok and 1 Karbovantsiv values. The second, third, fourth, and fifth stamps were issued on May the 15th, 1992, and the first one was issued sometime in July of 1992. Now, for all 5 of them, it was too late for Tariff 1's domestic and KISS Nation mail, but not too late for non-KISS international mail. Could it be? You just never know. At any rate, the second stamp is violet ink overprinted, and it is said that this color was used for only 1 day when they ran out of black ink. This cover bears a very interesting stamp. Or is it stamps? Here we have one piece that has been revalued twice. The left half revalued to 50 kopecks or 50 kopioks in Ukrainian denomination, and the right half to 1 ruble or 1 karbovanets in Ukrainian denomination. They have yet to catch up with the times here in this part of Ukraine, apparently, because it's still in Russian. But at any rate, the 1.5 karbovantsiv total met the required in-era registered rate for mail going to KISS nations, and in this case going from Ukraine to Russia. And this was a very popular destination back in the 90s, Ukraine mail to Russia. This was mailed during Tariff 2, more specifically on September the 23rd, 1992. And the twinning of these two revalues was unofficial, yet postal clerks briefly created this to make their work easier. And as I understand it, this was only stopped after an in-house audit caught this activity. Very interesting cover. I just about put this cover in my forget about it pile quite some time ago, until one day when I put my glasses on and realized that the tax perk utilitarian was in fact an application. Up until that point in time, I thought it was a direct hand stamp. And so there was an earthquake in my house. I had a cover that was extremely important and assumes a very prominent location in my exhibit today. Telegraph tape tax perks were uncommonly used from May 1992 to May 1995 in several oblasts across the nation. Mint stamps are unknown because these were applied directly onto the cover by the postal clerk, and the value was applied in pen onto the tax perk by the postal clerk. Here we have a cover that represents Lutsk. This tax perk is from Lutsk, and it was mailed from Lutsk to Riga, Latvia. So this is surface non-KISS foreign regular mail during Tariff 6. The 1,892 karbovantsiv is bang on when it comes to the required franking for that quality of mail. Not rounded off to 1900, not rounded off to 1850, bang on the exact required rate. One of the very few covers with this type of exactness. Here are some interesting stamps from the city of Chernivtsi. In fact, only one stamp, but we have a block of 10 at the bottom for these stamps. I refer to them as hybrid overprint utilitarian tax perk stamps. And you can see that they were completed in red ink insofar as the overprint is concerned, with a tax perk hand stamp on top of a pair of imperforate former Soviet stamps. And so we have an overprint block of 10. Without the overprint, it would be a block of 20, but with the overprint, it is a block of 10. These stamps were in common use until January the 5th, 1993, which was the end of Tariff 2. However, the big question is, when were they first used? We have a statement on letterhead in the upper left-hand corner of this frame. You see the postmaster's signature overridden by a Chernivtsi hand stamp that ties the signature to this letterhead to more or less authenticate the fact that he signed it before this piece was completed. And then we have a single hybrid overprint tax perk from the city of Chernivtsi that is tied to the letterhead with a cancel that is dated June the 11th, 1992. All of the verbal and anecdotal evidence points to the fact that this stamp was first used as early as perhaps the second or third week of January. But we do not have any evidence to this as of yet. If it was used at that point in time, you'd think that there'd be pieces or wrappers that are around somewhere, but we have not come up with one as of yet. These were used for oversized packages, overage packages that were sent to North America primarily, and probably Europe as well. So when were these first used? Well, we just don't know. We do know, however, that it was only later on, under pressure from the national government, that Postmaster A.I. Tohinets finally completed this authentication statement on Chernivtsi letterhead that is in the upper left of this frame. So, in terms of chronological order, I show this stamp along a time frame where June would fall in 1992. However, we should know that this could easily have been placed in the January section of this slideshow. Please keep that in mind. And by the way, multiples of this stamp are scarce. Now, earlier on in this presentation, we alluded to a couple of facts about overprints. First, we said at the beginning of this presentation that Chernivtsi, of the four that had a marketing program, was the most professional. They even had a catalog, at least one catalog. And second, later on in the presentation, we stated that in terms of overprints, Kyiv, Lviv, and Chernihiv's overprints were kind of granted some informal but very heavy national status. And in fact, that the overprints, the original overprints from those three oblasts, are even listed in Michel. But not the forgotten cousin, not Chernivtsi, the most professional of them, which I find kind of ironically interesting. Here is Chernivtsi Oblast's first overprints sets, aside from the tax perk, which we have yet to realize when it was first used. These are national arms, and they are a set of 6 that were issued starting August the 3rd, 1992. So they were issued during Tariff 2, and they were completed by offset lithography with a 10 by 10 image plate. And the quantities are stated as above each of the overprinted images, and they were in common use into December of 1993. So the stamp that was minted with the lowest number is the last one, the Hollow Shield 5 carbon-sieve at 3,128, which means that this is the maximum number of sets that there could be. Chernivtsi Oblast decided to release their own Trident overprints once a broker from Borisvin Printworks, I believe his name was Mirosnichenko, he had already completed overprinting for Kyiv, Lviv, and Chernihiv, visited the postmaster for Chernivtsi Oblast. You saw make-ready sheets earlier, demonstrated a few frames ago, and here are the 2 patterns that are used for this set of overprinted revalues. Again, we have a hollow shield, a narrow solid shield, and Ukraine traditional numerals. Quite a nice overprint. Here is a cover demonstrating usage from this set of 6 that Chernivtsi Oblast put out. This is domestic registered mail that was posted on August the 4th, 1992, this during Tariff 2. This is the second day after issue, and this cover went from the city of Chernivtsi to the city of Kyiv. The 1.5 carbon-sieve met the required in-error rate for this quality of mail at that point in time. We see that the Chernivtsi stamp is paired with a Kyiv 50 Kopyok stamp. It's going to be Kyiv along this timeline because Lviv's, which are near identical to completely identical to Kyiv's, did not come out until a few days later, into mid-late August. And speaking about overprints from Lviv, here is their 10 revalue set of 26, all the stamps of which were issued on the 21st of August 1992, this during Tariff 2, rather than spread over a period of time as did Kyiv issue their overprints. Now this set is virtually identical in pretty well every way to Kyiv's. The overprint colors are the same, the platform stamps are the same. The only difference between this set and Kyiv's is that there is no 5-carbon involved. And so, unless you are absolutely certain about origin and covers, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between these stamps and Kyiv's once these ones were also issued. They were completed by a 10 by 10 image plate through offset lithography. The upper row of stamps were in common use until January 1993, and the rest of them were in use until December of that year, 1993. It is interesting to note that a 5-carbon sheet of stamps did become available in Lviv, but according to Postmaster General for Lviv, Olenik, this was an unauthorized sheet, and he is not aware of how it managed to enter the scene when it came to his post offices. This set of inverts is quite impressive. It's a set of 10 re-values, and so we've covered all of the re-values from the Lviv set here as inverts. And of course there are varieties, short dash, and this type of thing, but at the very least we've covered all 10 re-values, and this is quite a feat in itself. So I show these inverts to you. I am absolutely certain that these are Lviv inverts rather than Kyiv because of the origin from which I obtained these stamps. Here we have a cover that was mailed from Ukraine to Alexandria, Virginia, USA on the 27th of August, 1992. So this is a very early mailing of stamps from the Lviv Revalues and Overprints set. It's a commemorative cover to Cardinal Joseph Slipei, and it has a commemorative cancel, but the cancels date for the commemorative cancel as well as the common cancel from the post office are the same, the 27th of August. You see the Lviv stamp at the lower center of this cover paired up with a national 5-carbon issue. Interesting that they would make a point of using a 5-carbon stamp, which in fact was not included in the set of 10 re-values for Lviv. Interesting. Earlier on in this slide presentation, we saw wrappers that were of the utilitarian type created by the city of Kyiv for the mailing of newsprint items through their postal system. Here we have a wrapper that bears provisionals from Lviv's set of 26. There are in fact 2 pairs on this wrapper. One pair includes 2 5-carbon definitives from the national set of allegoricals that the nation of Ukraine issued. And the other pair is from the set of 26, a pair of 50-carbon overprint revalued stamps from that overprint set. Now, this is foreign non-KISS registered mail that was posted on January the 4th, 1993. This is the tail end of Tariff 2. Very fortunate, and you'll see why in a moment. This particular item went from the city of Borislav to Toronto, and it was mailed on the second last day with total franking of 110 carbon. So this accounts for a weight factor of anywhere from 21 to 100 grams. Now, why was it fortunate that they mailed this at the tail end of Tariff 2? Look at the note at the bottom. Had they waited for another couple of days for Tariff 3, which started on the 6th, this same package would be over 9 times more in franking cost. Hyperinflation attacks yet again. We finish off the KLC group of overprinted revalues with Chernihiv's 3-value set of 13 that was finally issued on September the 8th, 1992. They left it until this point in time during that year because they wanted it to coincide with their 1300th anniversary as an oblast. Now, the set was completed through overprint by a 10 by 10 image lithographic plate, and common use, the top rows, the Kopyok values to December 1992, and the bottom row, the Karbovan values, until November 1994. And again, there is little to no difference between the Chernihiv set and the Lviv and the Kyiv set because of having used the same platform stamps and the same ink. It'll take quite an expert to be able to tell the difference. There is a slight glint difference between the ink that was used for overprinting the Lviv and Chernihiv set compared to that of Kyiv's. So you might get a break there, but nonetheless, still very, very difficult to tell the differences. This cover bears stamps that were issued as part of the Chernihiv revalues set of overprints. This is domestic registered commercial mail that was posted on December the 1st, 1992. It is local City of Chernihiv mail, and the 2 Karbovan total met the required in-error rate for this quality of mail. Now, these stamps are from positions 19 and 20 on any given sheet. There is only one per sheet of this specific pairs combination, and so this makes a cover that bears a pair like this something of a special cover. There is a reverse pair on the other side of the sheet, that is a solid trident and hollow trident turned around, and so that would be another intact special pair on cover. Kyiv Municipal Post created Christmas gifts. Here we have 2 of them. Coats of Arms souvenir sheets that were issued in December 1994, although we do know that some snuck out the back door of the post office, so to say, sneaking out the back door, before this point in time, December 1992. The brown overprinted with black ink is a standard overprint, and the violet on aqua, the 3 Kopek aqua stamp, I think that's an aqua color, is an invert. Now, typically, the black on brown sheets had this guarantee cancel on the reverse. It said Philatelic souvenir, Kyiv Post Office number 30, issued in 1992, and you see a wonderfully designed post horn at the bottom within the shield. However, there are some examples without this, and it is because obviously they snuck out the back door. How they snuck out the back door, well, your guess is as good as mine. So they were printed by full sheet plates. Quantities, there were 25,000 of these black on brown overprints. The violet invert, there were about 1,000 of them, and they were a mix of revalued stamps and labels. There are far many more labels on the invert violet on aqua sheet, the invert sheet, than there are on the black on brown. They were in uncommon use until July the 12th, 1993, and they were used despite their souvenir status primarily because of, yes, you guessed it, hyperinflation. And here is proof that these stamps were in fact used on cover. We have an example of a 5 Karbovan stamp canceled at the bottom of this cover. That's a national issue. And we have an example of Kyiv Post souvenir stamps, the hollow shield variety, with a dash and a space between the dash and the 2 zeros at the upper right-hand corner, canceled on June the 5th, 1993, and sent through the mail, obviously, at this point in time. So this is domestic registered mail. As you can see, it's registered posted June the 5th, kind of a divide between Tariff 3 and Tariff 4. It's the day after Tariff 3 ended and Tariff 4 began. Cities of Kyiv to Rivne, the total franking of 6 Karbovantsiv covered the in-era rate for Tariff 3. Back to another set of overprinted revalues for Chernivtsi Oblast. These are called local arms and were issued on the 25th of January 1993, which is during Tariff 3. And of course, as usual, they were printed through offset lithography. Now, the upper row has pairs of stamps. They're in fact singles, but they're in pairs because the first of the pairs says Ukraine Post and the second says Post Ukraine, and so on, all the way on to the 100 Karbovantsiv value. And you can see that the Ukraine Post version are far less in terms of overprinted issues than compared to the Post Ukraine stamps. And then on to the second row. This is why the set is called Local Arms. We see Chernivtsi's coat of arms on top of a block of 4, so that these are block of 4 singles that are created with this kind of overprint: 40, 60, 100, 200, and 400 Karbovantsiv. The overprint images for each row are to the right. Very impressive group of stamps. This is on green platform 1 Kopek stamps. There are other platform stamps that were overprinted in the identical fashion as well. This cover bears a pair of stamps in State-Tenant fashion from this Local Arms Chernivtsi Oblast set. Here we see a cover with a pair of 50 Karbovantsiv stamps. 50 plus 50 equals 100 carbs. This is domestic, regular mail. It was posted during Tariff 6, more specifically on January the 10th, 1994. And the 100 carbs met the required in-era rate for this local city of Chernivtsi mail. And in fact, the cover has a bonus. It is machine canceled, again making this quite a spectacular example of usage. These stamps were referred to earlier in this slide presentation when we were saying that we would meet up with a group that was both lithographically and typographically overprinted. And here they are. These are block of 4 singles. They were issued shortly after the prior set, three days later, on January the 28th, 1993. They're double overprints. It looks like Chernivtsi Oblast called back their Local Arms issues, or at least the blocks, and redesignated them with a further red typographed overprint. So now, having been issued during Tariff 3, the second overprint is in red ink, and it says Bukovina, and Bukovina refers to the area's beech forests. The violet ink, as we know, was via lithography, and the red ink via typography, and both were printed with a 10 by 10 image plate. Quantities at 160 each, common use until November the 9th, 1994. And we should note that if at any point in time these block of singles were separated, divided in half in any way whatsoever, for example, the stamps became nullified. The overprint image to the upper right corner. Do you see what I finally see? Of course, we're going to show a cover with a block of 4 single double overprint on it to show usage. But look at the single stamp. Look at the overprint on it. The regular overprint pattern would be to the lower left. Posta Ukraina at the top and 100 Karbovantsiv, the revalue at the bottom. But this one is either shifted in terms of the overprinting plate, or the pain itself. Here we have the value between the words Ukraina at the top and Posta at the bottom. I didn't even notice this during two exhibitions when this was part of my exhibit. And then all of a sudden, looking at my own exhibit, I saw it. So now you see what I see, a beautiful cover. This one is local regular City of Chernivtsi mail posted during Tariff 7, more specifically on November the 23rd, 1994. And the 500 Karbov total meets the required in-era fee for this quality of mail at this time. Mykolaiv Oblast was back at it again with another couple of sets of utilitarian stamps. You may recall their original set, which was issued on May 1992, shown on frame 60. That set included the provisional stamps with the largest faces. Well, these two stamps are definitely smaller in terms of face area. The black inked 12 value set of 14 was issued January 1993 to April 1993, this entire span being within Tariff 3. And there are 12 values and 14 stamps, 14 an extra 2 stamps because of paper variety. And the red ink 21 value set of 25 was issued during several tariffs from May 1993 to January 1994. Quantities unknown, printed by rotary press, various paper. Now let's take a look at the paper types. The black ink set and most of the stamps in the red ink set were on standard stock unbleached paper. The red ink set also includes a few values that were printed on coupon, the type of coupon you see at the lower right of this frame, the 1, 3, and 10 carb coupons. I suppose hyperinflation was affecting the value of this coupon money as well as the stamps, and so coupons were put to purpose with the manufacture of stamps on their blank side. At any rate, look at the 2 carb red utilitarian. We have 3 of them. One is in single format and the other 2 are in a pair. The single 2 carb stamp is on the standard unbleached stock paper while the pair of 2s is on coupons. So you can see what the difference looks like. And I put those on coupons in pairs just so that you could see that these were the values that were put on coupons. And in most cases also on the unbleached paper, except for the case of the 15 Karbov value. It was only on coupons, and interestingly as well, the numerals on the 15 carb stamps are above and below each other rather than side by side. Interesting. At any rate, you may recall that we speculated use of utilitarians on international non-KISS mail, despite this not being for that. Here we have an absolutely spectacular cover that was non-KISS mail from Ukraine to Canada that includes one of the black ink sets utilitarians. Stunning. This is foreign non-KISS registered mail posted the 27th of May 1993, this during Tariff 3, and it went from the city of Mykolaiv to the city of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. The total franking is accounted for through a 450 Kopiok hand stamp, it's a violet hand stamp to the upper right, and the 50 Kopiok stationary stamp, plus the 100 Karbov utilitarian, sort of in the middle of the cover and slightly lower than the center. They all add up to 105 Karbov, the required in-era franking for this quality of mail at this point in time. Superb international mail with this stamp. What a find in a bunch of covers that were designated as from Russia. another such cover, except from the red ink set of Mykolaiv Utilitarians. Here we have the same two people corresponding with each other. Sheshtakov is sending a letter to Mr. Walter Wixon, but there is no statement on this particular cover about Victoria products anymore. Now we see two values of utilitarians from the red set, 4 1,000 Karpovy stamps on the reverse, one 5,000 Karpovy stamp on the front, along with a commemorative national issue at 200 Karpovy and a definitive national issue at 300 Karpovy at this point in time. It is foreign, non-KISS registered airmail that was posted 11 months after the prior black inked cover. On this one, on the 25th of April 1994, which is during Tariff 6, and again going from the cities of Mykolaiv to Victoria, British Columbia. And here we have a total franking meeting the in-era required fee, rounded off from 9,457 Karpovy to 9,500 carbs. A superb international cover yet again, and how lucky to have achieved these two covers from an auction firm on West Coast Canada, with these covers mixed in with a whole bunch of other Russian material. Partway through the issuance of the black inked utilitarians from the prior set, Mykolaiv Oblast decided to go ahead with these two sets of overprints for their capital, the city of Mykolaiv. Now here we see strips that were issued on February the 2nd, 1993, this during Tariff 3. There were 10 of these strips across a sheet. Each strip includes 9 revalues, one each of 2, 3, 5, 6, 14, 15, 35, and 70 Karpovy, and 2 of the 100 Karpovy revalues. And invert strips exist, and insofar as the sheet is concerned, there are 8 revalues. In the first column, there is one each of the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 revalues. Then the next columns include 25 of the revalues to 15 Karpovy. Next up are columns consisting of 10 revalues of the 35 Karpovy, and then the final 2 columns were 10 of the 70 carb revalues. There are 6 different fonts on this sheet, and there is also a deformed shield variety in position 40. All told, this results in 20 varieties per sheet. Stamps from both sets were in common use until November the 9th, 1994, and quantities are unknown. They were completed through typography, pane-size plates, black ink for the sheet, and black or blue for the strips. Now, just in case you are wondering how these overprint revalues are attested to, we have a certificate for authenticity of provisional stamps from Mykolaiv Oblast. This is their decree number 1965, and it is signed by Postmaster M.N. Nazarov. And you can see on the left is a black and white image of the certificate. This was lifted from a German language catalog that was published in 1994 by what was then the German chapter of the Ukrainian Philatelic and Numismatic Society. More recently, a publication within the Journal for the Ukrainian Philatelic and Numismatic Society buffed up the certificate a bit, turned it into English, and added some color. And the mock-up certificate of the black and white image from the German language catalog is to the right, and you can read the English and you can see that it's got a seal or a crest, which is the official crest of Mykolaiv, and then N.M. Nazarov's signature between the crest and his typed name. We have two covers that demonstrate use of the two overprint revalue sets for Mykolaiv. First up is a cover that utilizes the 6 carbon-receive value from a strip of 10, and it is registered domestic mail, posted the 28th of March 1993, this during Tariff 3, and the stamp's 6 carbon-receive revalue satisfied the required rate at this point in time for this kind of mail. Now, what I find interesting is that of all the covers that I have with these stamps on them, very, very few have only one stamp on them. And so I'm beginning to value the covers with a single strip of 10 stamp on them from Mykolaiv Oblast as a little more valuable, or a little rarer at the very least, harder to get, than a cover with a bunch of these stamps on them. The second cover shows usage of stamps from the overprinted sheet of 50 revalue. Here we have a 1 carbon-vinets revalued stamp and a 5 carbon-vencive revalued stamp. 1 plus 5 is 6, and the 6 carbon-vencive total satisfied the requirement for this kind of mail at this point in time in Ukraine, registered domestic mail. Now, this cover is posted on February the 11th. And what do we know about February the 11th? That's the first day these stamps were available. Very, very interesting. And there are the overprints for the two types of stamps in the top two corners. For a period of time during 1993, Ukraine had yet another international non-KISS section in their tariffs. This was for mail to the United States of America. They separated the USA from all of the other non-KISS countries and had a separate section for them. The effect was that there was an additional fee. Fees were higher for airmail rates during tariffs 3 and 4. This would be January the 6th to August the 29th, 1993. And then after this, they put the United States back in with all of the other non-KISS international nations. So we have a cover here that represents this period of time with a USA rate. This is registered USA rate mail that was posted on the 22nd of April 1993, this during Tariff 3. We see a 35 carbon-vencive stamp. This is a sheet stamp in the lower left corner. We see a 70 carbon-vencive strip stamp, strip of 10 stamp. It's in the upper right-hand corner of the cover. And then we have a 10 carbon-vencive black inked utilitarian stamp from the set that was shown just a few frames ago. The total fee of 115 carbon-vencive met the required in-error rate for this quality of registered non-KISS international USA mail at this point in time in Ukraine. If this cover was going anywhere else to any other non-KISS nation, it would be 10 carbon-vencive less, 105 carbs instead of 115 carbs. A beautiful cover. Here is a utilitarian set of provisionals that was issued by Chernihiv Oblast. This is the 25 value set of 40. It was issued over a prolonged period of time, May the 25th, 1993 to December the 26th of 1993. 15 of the 25 values are on two types of paper, and therefore we have 40 stamps in this set. This is unbleached standard stock paper by and large. Quantities are unknown. It was letterpress printed in sheets of 280, 14 by 20, and they were in common use into May of 1995, and of course intended for national use only. Now we have a couple of paper varieties to show you at the bottom. The apparent difference between the shade of the papers for the 5 carbon-sieve stamps aren't as obvious as that for the 200 carbon-sieve stamps. Quite apparent. Now there are security features on these stamps. Aside from the fact that they were to have been glued by the postal clerk in the post office, the larger values, the 200, the 100, the 900, and so forth, have the 0 with the slash mark across them. Now, while it might seem easy for a basement fabricator to duplicate this, it is not all that easy to line the two up when you are putting the slash over the 0, or vice versa, the 0 over the slash mark. But there's another feature. Look at the right margin of each stamp. There are a series of dots, except beside the A there is a semicolon. And believe it or not, of the forgeries we have seen, all of them do not include the semicolon, they include a colon. So this security feature worked. Interesting. It is infrequent that you ever see a postcard that is franked with a utilitarian or overprint stamp during this era of postal history in Ukraine. This is local city of Chernihiv registered mail. It's a postcard that went through the mail system on the 16th of February 1994, this during Tariff 6. And the stamps 200 carbon-sieve met the required in-error rate for this quality of mail at that time. This is a postal money order for 1,000 carbon-sieve, and this is just under $8 USD at that point in time. But don't forget, this is a lot of money to most Ukrainians at that point in time. Postcards with surcharge adhesive stamps are very uncommon, so if you see one, grab it while you can. This is quite a nice piece. Now it was Rivna's turn to put out a utilitarian set of stamps. Here we see a set of 18 long stamps. They were completed by mimeograph in violet ink on standard white paper. They were issued over a prolonged period of time as well, June the 6th, 1993 to December the 6th, 1993, intended primarily for tariffs 5 and 6. Quantities are unknown, and common use went into November of 1994. Now, it took a while, but I finally found a cover mailed from Ukraine to Poland. I never thought I'd find one, but I finally did. This is foreign non-KISS registered mail that was posted March the 23rd, 1994. Cities of Rivne to Poland. The 9,150 carbon-sieve satisfied the required in-error rate at this point in time for this quality of mail. Had Poland been a KISS nation, it borders Ukraine just like Russia and Moldova and so forth. Had it been a KISS nation instead of a non-KISS international nation, this quality of mail would only have cost 500 carbon-sieve. Interesting, and it goes to show you that it is quite likely international non-KISS mail did indeed subsidize KISS nation mail, KISS international mail. Because don't forget, most of Russia is further away from Ukraine than all of Poland. At the beginning of the utilitarians section, way back when, we took a look at some of the varieties, and Kharkiv is a real good example of variety when it comes to the creation of utilitarians and the usage of different paper types. Here we see cardboard in the form of a postcard. You see what appears to be a Christmas card on the lower left. Cardboard in the form of the insurance form We showed a while ago Form F17 in the upper right-hand corner. There is another cardboard form in the middle at the top, valued at 0.001 carbonets. And finally, we have a phototelegram. This is a facsimile form that is thin white paper in the middle toward the bottom. We talked about ribbed cardboard. Some is and some is not. But in the case of the insurance form, this particular type was. Look at the augmented stamps below the red on beige form. Look at the possibilities for ribbing varieties for the two stamps, horizontal and vertical. Now here is mail that used one of the cardboard forms we saw on the prior slide. This stamp, a 100 carbon-sieve stamp sideways, is a postcard example. And interestingly, there is a skipped cancel. Two of the impressions from this canceling machine are shown. This is regular local mail, City of Kharkiv, posted April 4th, 1994, this during Tariff 6, and the 100 carbon-sieve met the required in-error rate for this kind of mail. Now, I pointed out the skipped double impression cancel. It's a machine cancel. Typically, machine cancels, you want to pick them up if you can because they're scarce compared to hand cancels, hand-stamped cancels. This was a thick stamp, however, which was not machine cancel friendly, and very soon the post office learned their lesson and either went back to hand cancels or started using thinner paper. This is the wonderful set that we saw at the beginning of the utilitarians section from Ivano-Frankivsk. It is the result of the city of Ivano-Frankivsk's main post office, and it is a set of 4 that was issued on August the 6th, 1993. An interesting history is involved with this set. But first off, it was issued during Tariff 4, and it was printed via a multi-purpose device using unique single images on 26 millimeter wide rolls of paper. Azure blue ink is the ink color, and there can be a maximum 812 complete sets as defined by the 12 carbon-sieve stamps total output. This was in common use for only 2 weeks. Why? The completion of the set was encouraged by the local stamp club president. However, normal protocol was bypassed, and once the SBU found out about this is Ukraine's CIA, more or less, use became hazardous. A beautiful set, but which bypassed protocol and therefore had to be halted very quickly once the law found out. This cover bearing one of the stamps is registered Kiss Nation mail. It's going from Ivano-Frankivsk to Russia, and in fact to Moscow. And the complete 88 carbon-sieve total, the 50 carbon-sieve utilitarian plus the impression at 38, added up to the required in-area total to meet and satisfy the requirement for this kind of mail at that point in time, 88 carbon-sieve. The cover was mailed on the last day of the 2-week period of safety, and these are not easy covers to come by. These 2 sets of utilitarians were issued by Chernivtsi Oblast. We have a fauna set of 9 and a definitive local set of 4, and the set of 4 is shown in pairs. Now, insofar as the faunas are concerned, the first 6 were issued on November the 2nd, 1993 with the final 3 being issued on December the 28th, 1993. There can be only 100,000 complete sets. These were in common use to November the 9th, 1994, and as you can tell, the theme is indigenous animals. As to the definitive locals, these were issued on December the 30th, 1993, and were in common use until May the 31st, 1995. The first 2 values saw 500,000 issued, and the next 2 at 100,000 issued. Now, the first 2 values include a constant frame error. Take a look at the pairs, the 100 and 250 carbon-receive pairs. The top stamp has a normal frame variety, the lower stamp has the frame error variety. This is in position 97, that is the frame error variety, on every second pane per sheet. So you have 2 panes per sheet, there is an upper pane and a lower pane, and this error is only in position 97 on the lower pane. And so we have here a set of 4, and the first 2 values have variety. Both sets were printed on newsprint quality paper, and so with this quality of paper comes inclusion, but inclusions do not equal variety. This is a common trait of this kind of paper. Security featuring. These are very complex designed stamps, and it would be extremely difficult for even the best of forgers to complete any of these stamps in their basement. But more importantly, they included migratory ink. So if anyone tried to reuse the stamp by, say, soaking it off, for example, the ink would start melting away. How unique. Further to this, these were the only 2 sets that include booklets. There is a red covered booklet. Inside the red covered booklet were the first 6 values of the faunas. The blue covered booklet contained the highest 3 values of the faunas. Then the black covered booklet included all 4 values for the definitive locals, and 1,000 each per booklet. Here we see 3 uncut sheets from the 2 sets. There are 2 for the faunas, 1 for the definitive local. All 3 sheets come from complete sets of uncut sheets. Incredible. You're seeing these 3 sheets because they demonstrate the 3 different types of blocks that would be needed to have intact selvage. So for the 250 fauna with the wolf on it, you'd need a 2x2 block to have all of the selvage. You need a 2x3 block for all of the selvage in the 5,000 carbon-receive fauna sheet, and then a 2x4 block for the definitive locals to have all of the text from the selvage. I crop off a part of the 5,000 carbon-receive fauna sheet to show you the possibilities of variety. Not only a block with selvage, but there is the possibility for a wide gutter pair. Wonderful. Now, I am aware of one other person who has sheets of these stamps, not just panes, but sheets as well. What was supposed to happen, these sheets, when they arrived at the post office, the panes were supposed to have been guillotined apart. But obviously, in the case of this set, and one that I know of in the United Kingdom, they were not. Quite a spectacular collection of uncut sheets. This cover has a 100 carbon-receive stamp from both of the migratory ink sets that Chernivtsi Oblast put out. This is domestic registered mail that was posted on June the 8th, 1994. and it went from the city of Chernivtsi to Ivano-Frankivsk, the city of Ivano-Frankivsk, and the total franking, 200 Karbovan-Siv, met the required in-era Tariff 6 rate for this quality of mail. A beautiful cover because it demonstrates usage of these stamps from both sets. Now, did Chernivtsi Oblast know how to market their goods? We have first day covers. Look at the left. These are just two examples of all 13. There is the wolf cover when the wolf stamp was issued on the 2nd of November 1993, and they happen to use 12 noon. There is the Wolf 5000 that was issued on the 28th of December 1993. Boy, did Chernivtsi know how to market. Here is a set of rather simple-looking surcharge imaged utilitarians. They're from the city of Boyarka's main post office, Boyarka being in Kyiv Oblast, and this is a 3-value set of 4 that was issued on November the 6th, 1993. 3 values, 4 stamps. The first 2 stamps, there are 2 varieties. One with a little bit of a more ornate looking frame than the second one. These were issued during Tariff 5 and were printed with a single image hand stamp, black only on off-white paper, and quantities are unknown because these were completed on an as-required basis, although only for a limited period of time. Because once these stamps were released, the set's intended tariff lasted just another month. And so to have a cover that is in era to the tariff that it had been intended for is something of a feat for these stamps and covers that have these stamps on them. This is domestic registered mail that was posted on the 19th of November 1993 during Tariff 5 when the issues were released. City of Boyarka to Irpin. Total franking of 54 Karbovan-Siv met the required in-era rate for this quality of mail at that time. And as you see from the note at the bottom, there aren't that many covers such as this since the set was so late into its tariff that are tariff era covers. 4 stamps on this one and a stationary image. It all adds up to the required in-era franking of 54 Karbovan-Siv. This is from Ochakiv District Post, Ochakiv being in Mykolaiv Oblast. It is a utilitarian rose-papered sheet of 18. It was issued in November 1993, and stamps from it saw uncommon use into early November 1994. This was photocopy printed onto lilac rose paper, the paper color and quality acting as a security feature, and it was completed only in black ink. Quantities are unknown. There are 6 values each of the 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, and 70 Karbovan-Siv value stamps. Completed values are repeated 3 times across a row, but there are 10 varieties since the typed master copy had mistakes. Now, despite this sheet's blunt simplicity, intact sheets are desirable as they are extremely scarce. They saw very scarce proper use as the issued values on the sheet for the tariff in which it was issued, Tariff 5, ended about a month later. Now, if you compare this sheet to Tariff 5's values charts, I only see 2 of the stamps that match any of the values. There's umpteen values in these charts. I only see the 50 and the 70 directly matching any one of the charges, and these would be more obscure charges, not your regular everyday mail type fee for a stamp. I have 2 examples there for you. They're both 50 Karbovan-Siv stamps. The first one from positions 4 and 6, and the second one in between those at position 5, and you can see the variety. The word posta to the left of the second stamp has an extra sh along the apostrophe marks on the outer edge of the left side of that particular stamp. This set of overprints is from Borodyanka District Post. Borodyanka is in Kiev Oblast. It has the distinction of being the last overprinted set of stamps for this provisional genre. The set of 22 was issued in March 1994, and they were in common use into November of 1994. They're all carbon-C values, quantities are unknown, and they were completed with a single hand stamp overprinted in either black or violet, as you see. There are two overprint types of text size, I show examples to the lower left, that were used consistently per stamp. Now, insofar as the violet overprinted stamps are concerned, to the lower right, this set was thought to include 18 stamps until a group of these four violets, was uncovered. Apparently, violet was used when black ink ran out, but use was abandoned after only 1 day because of quality concerns. A much sought after foursome. Now here is a blow-up of the four violet overprinted stamps compared to their black overprinted counterparts. As you can see, there would have been quality concerns. It looks like the violet ink was a bit too watery, and then when they tried to spare it so that it wouldn't, kind of smudge the way it did in the upper left-hand stamp, it was too light in comparison to the background color of the original stamp. Here is a Borodyanka district posted cover that demonstrates usage of these overprinted stamps. 4 different types here. A 100 on brown, a 100 on red, a 100 on blue in 2 cases, and a 50 on blue in 2 cases. The stationary stamp being ignored because of long having been nullified. This is regular domestic mail posted December the 28th, 1994, which is during Tariff 7. It went from the city of Borodyanka to Kiev, both cities in Kiev Oblast, and the total franking of 500 carbon-C met the required in-error rate for this quality of mail. A note at the bottom, the cover was posted past the period of common use, as earlier indicated, for these stamps by about a month, maybe a little more. Here is something of a side benefit in completing presentations such as this, something that I had not noticed until looking at this cover once again through this PowerPoint. I decided to blow up the multiple because I thought I saw something, and then I realized I did. There are multiple revalues on the same sheet. Well, there must be, because if you take a look at the pair, there is a 50 revalue on the top and a 100 revalue on the bottom. It seems obvious upon magnification, but I did not see this prior to doing this 3rd edition of the PowerPoint presentation. Now, there doesn't seem to be any published material reviewing and acknowledging this. However, while this testifies to the value of multiples, whether on cover or otherwise, I will have to complete further study, and in particular translation of non-English genre texts, in order to verify whether we have discovered this herein or it had already been discovered before this. This is the youngest of all of the provisionals in this 1990s Ukrainian genre. It is a portion of a cash register receipt that was put into use by the city of Zhizhniv's main post office starting June 1995. And this was in uncommon use until March the 31st, 1996, after having been put into initial use during the first month of Tariff 8. I've mocked it up from a black and white image And we see that it is in violet ink, and values were arbitrary according to need, given the item that was being posted. Here we see the value of 5,000 Karboventsiv on this piece. That was the regular domestic fee at this point in time in Ukraine. The 4 to the right of the 5,000 Karboventsiv is the cash register machine. And we also see the initials of the postal clerk or perhaps the manager to the far left. There were other events and variables that affected Ukraine's postal system during this point in time in Ukraine. For example, at the national level, Postal Concern Ukraina, PK Ukraina, later to be known as Ukrposhta, Ukraine Post, issued stamps that were manufactured by foreign stamp companies. We have two examples here, one from the Canadian Banknote Company of Canada that was issued on the 24th of September 1994, Shevchenko University. Now, eventually, however, Ukraine halted the contracting of stamps with countries like Canada, Austria, Hungary, and fell back on Goznak. They had been utilizing Goznak right from the onset. And of course, they're a KISS nation, as well as Ukraine being a KISS nation. And so I suppose, that hyperinflation saw them falling back on the lowest common economic denominator, if we can put it that way. This is the last stamp that Ukraine had to contract a foreign nation to complete for them at the national level. Kharkiv Zoo 100th anniversary, and that being on March the 23rd, 1996. Here is PK Ukraina's first attempt at a national issue. This was Independence Day, the 3rd anniversary, and it was issued on September the 3rd, 1994. Now, this was nothing but stock lithography on white paper. It was gummed, and it did have tagging, but it was imperforate, lithographed, and after this one went out, back to the drawing board to further refine their printing system. But at any rate, a good try for the first attempt. The National Bank of Ukraine's secure mint and print facilities were completed ahead of schedule, and so they helped out whenever they could with the issue of stamps for Ukraine. Here is the last one such issue that the National Bank of Ukraine completed. Look at its beauty. They have demonstrated all sorts of abilities that they were able to conceive of and complete. We have, well, if you look at the middle stamp, you've got glossy goldish ink. If you look at the reverse of the stamp, on the right side, you see an impression. If you look at the complete mini pane or souvenir sheet, you see beautiful artwork. And there is even the code of the banker's moral ethics that is published in the lower left and lower right labels. And what I did was I extracted them and I pasted them together so that you could see how beautiful this micro print is. Very clear. The moral ethical code of bankers in Ukraine. A wonderful piece of work to finish off helping PK Ukraina. And after this issue, which was put out on September the 28th, 1999, Ukraine Post finally took the reins for everything that had to do with stamps. Well, by 1996, Ukraine's Karbovenets was so devalued that it was almost embarrassing, really. And so even the most cosmetic of changes was better than nothing. Speaking to this then, on the 2nd of September 1996, Ukraine moved from the Karbovenets to the hryvnia. They did this through adjusting the Karbovenets by 100,000. And so we have two postal examples at the bottom. On July the 19th, Ukraine issued the stamp that shows the handball players on the lower left, and we see this at during 1996 at 40,000 Karbovensiv. 40,000. After monetary reform, here is Ivan Podubny, 40 kopioks on November 10th, 1996. Well, that's just about it for this presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you have at least partly enjoyed this. I know it is extremely lengthy, but there isn't that much out there on this topic, and it's about time people have heard about this. I've been as detailed as possible in order to bring you some of the most important variables with respect to this provisional genre, and yet you should know that there are many, many more issues that I and others have that could make another point or two. But you know what? It's time to call it quits for this one. The 3rd anniversary edition of this presentation, and on the 25th anniversary of Ukraine's newfound freedom. I hope that you are encouraged to join our organization. Information is at www.upns.org. And here are some of our publications. We have several textbooks. The first one is the Provisional Postage Stamps of Ukraine. It's completely in English. There are details in the box to the lower left with respect to publication and so forth. And that was published by Ukrainian Philatelic Resources. In the middle, we show a copy of our journal. We have journals that are sent to our membership 2 times a year on average. And finally, we end off with a copy of one of our Trident Viznik newsletters. And this one's kind of mocked up a bit to make a firm point about the quality of it, along with the journal and our textbook publications. There are certain sources of information that have been huge in terms of my better understanding this genre of Ukrainian philately. There are people that are listed on this frame as well as textbook sources of information, and I cannot tell you how happy I am that I got into this particular genre. The textbooks have been wonderful in outlining knowledge, and the people have been wonderful in sharing their understanding with me. It really has been a pleasure. You will see a frame-by-frame citation, and then you will see at the bottom of the page further citation of others. Please read through this list. They are worthy people. And finally, I thought I'd finish off in the following manner. Mark, where do you get this stuff? I don't know how many times I've asked this same question of others. And it's kind of a compliment, isn't it? But it's true. The longer you've been in a field, the more and more contacts you make. 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, and so forth. And before you know it, you have a lot of people or firms from which you can buy or trade or network, brainstorm. The usual thing that people do who are passionate in a given field of genre, and in this case, Ukrainian provisional stamps during the 1990s. Most of the material within this presentation came from a Ukrainian dealer by the name of Mykola Shpuntenko. But there are other items from others, and I would like to pay them tribute as well. So here we go, frame by frame. Frame 9, the Karbabinets banknote, and for that matter, all of the other banknotes and coins that we see in here, except for the USA coin, courtesy of the Jerry Kalin collection. Frame 17, the Chernivtsi cover, Boris Zayachevsky. Frame 31, the manuscript revalued allegoricals cover, Alex Luhovy. Frame 38, the Kiev Tax Perk Wrappers, Vsevolod Sokolik and Peter Bylan. Frame 39 and 40, the Kiev Post Office 1 covers, Marian Stesko. Frame 45, the Otdeleni Sviazi Kharkiv overage cover, Peter Bylan. Frames 46 and 47, the Sumy material, Peter Bylan again. Frame 50, the Kiev Utilitarians cover, Bogdan Nehenyuv. 54, the KF6 mother plate, courtesy of the Boris Zhizhnevsky collection. Also on frame 54, the Chernivtsi 1 make-ready sheet, courtesy of the Andrew Baines collection. Frame 56, the Kiev 3 cover, Val Zabiaka. Frame 62, the Melitopol twinned overprints cover, Eastern Auctions of New Brunswick. Frame 64, Chernivtsi Tax Perk overprint authentication statement, courtesy of the Andrew Baines collection. Frame 68, the Lviv cover, Ingrid Kuzic. Frames 79 and 80, the Mykolaiv Utilitarian covers to Canada, Ron Leith Auctions of British Columbia. Frame 82, Mykolaiv Original Certificate of Authenticity, the black and white, was lifted from the Stolberg catalogs, and they're also in the citations. Frame 84, the Mykolaiv USA rates cover, Don Winnichuk. Frame 93, the uncut Chernivtsi migratory ink sheets, Vance Auctions of Ontario. And frame 107, I just want to give it up for Andrew Martinyuk, who translated from Ukrainian into English the Lobco 2nd edition catalog, and helping me to get into something like this. Many thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Cheers.